scholarships, and if you have any questions during this presentation, you can type them into the chat. You can raise your hand here on Zoom, and we'll also try to make time at the end for any questions and answers. So if you'd like to participate throughout the presentation, again, you're welcome to join in the chat. At the end, I'll also share my email if you want to ask any questions afterwards. Just also a note that we are recording this presentation. Okay. Okay, so we'll first talk about the first thing we recommend you to do is when you're writing your scholarship essays to do your research. You want to be intentional and consider your audience, who are you writing to? Find out more about the organization or the people that are involved behind the scholarship. So for example, you can ask, what is their mission? What is their purpose? What do they have on their website as their mission statement? What are their goals? So you could go over to their website, and many times organizations, programs will have their goals. If it's a memorial scholarship, or for example, if it's an honor of someone, then you could ask, what are some qualities of that person that they're honoring? For example, was that person a community service advocate? And if so, how does your experience align with that scholarship? You may also include in your essay any community service or anything that you've done that you're considering while you're considering the reader's expectations. You want to keep in mind, again, who your audience is. So an example of a memorial scholarship, you kind of keep in line with this example, is the Don Van Bruggen Scholarship that the Learning Resource Center offers. And they offer, I believe, a scholarship for tutees and for tutors. It's a recognition of Don Van Bruggen. So you could research who that person is and what they stood for. And this can also help you write your essay and align your experience or your passion to show how it fits into the purpose of that scholarship. You may also have a general scholarship essay prepared already, which is a good start. But you can use it as a draft and tailor it to each specific scholarship you're applying to. So doing this, will help each scholarship essay be more personalized. It will help show your readers that you're really putting an effort into this particular scholarship you're applying to. So I mentioned being passionate. So this kind of ties into being passionate and personal, asking this broad question of who are you, and I'll share some examples of how you could zone in on talking a little bit about who you are. So this allows the reader to get to know you, to get to know who the person is behind the application. Now, so a lot of us actually attended a workshop this Tuesday regarding scholarships, applications, and the presenter mentioned that you also don't want to include your name or your Bronco ID. I just want to point that out before I go on here. So yes, you want to talk about yourself, but don't include any identifying information, like your name or your Bronco ID. Okay, so when you're talking about who are you, one way that you could give the committee, the scholarship committee, an opportunity to get to know you is to introduce yourself without actually meeting face to face, right? So this is where you want to share what you're passionate about. What is your story? What identities, do you embody? Basically, what led you to, for example, the specific major that you have or the field that you want to study, the career opportunities that you want to explore, that you want to pursue. What are some personal reasons that led to where you're at now? So here I'm including a few questions that you could ask yourself. But we encourage you to take some time to reflect, to consider, why you selected your current field. So let's think of an example. If let's say you're an engineering major, or one of many engineering majors. Let's say civil engineering with a focus on water quality. You can ask yourself, well, what was it that informed my decision to be passionate about this particular topic, water quality? Was it informed by something in your local town? Was it that the water quality was not so good, and then you got interested in that piqued your interest? Again, what inspires you to do that type of work that you're engaging in? Were you inspired by someone who was a mentor to you? Maybe you want to be a doctor because you experienced someone overcoming illness. You can share that story. You could expand on it in your essay. If another example, if you're a first generation college student, you may share experiences, that stem from this. For example, sharing about what led you to pursue higher ed. What does this mean for you and your loved ones? How does this identity inform you as an individual, as a scholar? You could also ask yourself what communities you're part of, what communities do you belong to, how do they inform your goals? And at this time, I'm going to share this image here, and I want you to reflect for just a few seconds here. And if you're comfortable sharing the chat, I'm welcoming you to include any communities or groups or identities that you identify with. Again, if you're comfortable sharing, I would like to see a few responses, hopefully, in the chat. I see that we have about 23 participants, so maybe we could get a good quarter of you participating. So again, what identities do you identify with? As you're doing that, I'll share a little bit about this image here. This one, it's adopted from this concept of intersectionality, and it essentially it's essentially how we as individuals are interconnected with many different identities, and that that there are systems of oppressions depending on what identity we're a part of. But in this sense, I was just including it so that you can think about the different identities that you identify with. So let's see the chat if there's anybody. Okay, so I don't see anybody identifying here, so I could include some of mine as an example. I am a Chicano. I am first generation college student from a low income background. I was first generation college student from a low income background. I am a brother. I am. Yeah, so okay, so I'm seeing a few here, like racial identity is one that was pointed out in the. Okay, so I'm seeing a few more. Thank you. Identify greatly with the Hispanic community, also first gen. We have someone else who mentioned Hispanic, first gen, low income background, eldest of three. Okay, that was me for the longest time. Eldest of three, first in my family, first sibling. Gender fluid identity. Yes, thank you. So thank you for sharing on the chat. So these are just some examples of things that you identify with, and you may also be passionate about in terms of identity. Latina, oldest child, first gen, Hispanic, first gen. Okay, so I'm seeing some similar themes here. Thank you. Yeah, so a woman, Ecuadorian, first gen. Oh, great. We have a lot of first gen. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, keep them coming. I'll keep reading them throughout. So here I want to give you some scholarship examples of how they may be tailored to identity. The prompts they may be tailored to identity. So I took this just the other day from the current scholarship fest. The current scholarships available at the scholarship portal, CPP scholarship portal, and we have here Access and Disability Alliance. And this one is seeking for individuals who are actively promoting disability awareness and serving as an advocate for people with disabilities. So if you are someone who is actively involved in promoting disability awareness, who is passionate about this, then you're welcome and encouraged to apply to this scholarship. Okay, so that's just to give you an example there. So in summary, brainstorming about who you are, what you're passionate about, and what has led you to where you are will help you connect with the essay prompt. So in this case, it would be some of the description here and the supplemental questions. And reflecting on your identity and background will give you essentially a foundation for what to include in your essay. All right, now we're gonna delve into some strategies because I've been hearing lately, since the scholarship portal opened up, we've been having a lot of conversations with students applying to scholarships. Some have been sharing how they experience writer's block. So how can we overcome that? And these pre-writing strategies can help prevent or eliminate that. When you're brainstorming, think let's see, I'll have this outline here. I already mentioned that. Okay, so we'll go over these different types. I'll go over them one by one, but let's go over identity or list. All right, so one of the pre-writing strategies we're going to discuss is creating a list, a simple list identifying different aspects of yourself. That includes your strengths, your challenges or obstacles that you have experienced or overcome, any accomplishments, achievements. So ask yourself, what are your accomplishments? What are my accomplishments? You could ask yourself, what are your organization or professional leadership experiences? What makes you unique? What makes you stand out? What are some qualities that you have that make you stand out, that sets you apart from other applicants? Keep these things in mind when you're writing your essay. You may also list, as an example, campus, community involvement, any activities, extracurricular activities you're involved with. Sharing this shows your reader that you are not only academically involved, which is greatly important. However, you could also showcase how you're involved on campus and your community. Another pre-writing strategy, as you're brainstorming, perhaps you'd like to be a little bit more creative with your pre-writing activity. You may like to do this activity instead, mapping or webbing. In this activity, you draw yourself as the person in the center of the page that you're working with, and then create links or webs, however you want to call them, to your person, and you will list in a way your experiences and milestones. You could get creative with it, you get artistic with it, and you will describe different milestones, professional development, among other descriptions, linking them to yourself. I mentioned you could be artistic, but doesn't have to. For example, you could also do it in bubbles, like a bubble map or a spider web. I think many of you might be familiar with the spider web. So it doesn't have to be all of, you see, I personally can't draw too well, so I probably won't be able to do what's on the image here. So essentially just creating a web or creating clouds. This activity helps writing be a bit more fun, a little bit more engaging. So you could plug in your map or web, the type of experiences that you want to talk about, what activities have you been part of, maybe what activities you're currently part of. You can include your club memberships, again, extracurricular activities. You may also include any leadership qualities and how you've gained them. When you're creating these branches, these webs, you may start noticing themes that you can then elaborate on in your essay. You may start noticing any recurring words or concepts that you're kind of repeating. So this, again, will showcase those themes. So I encourage you to explore and expand on these words, these concepts, these themes. There's also some applications, websites that can help you with creating these webs or maps. So one example is called Mind Map. So I encourage you to take advantage of these tools. All right, we're gonna go to the next one. I'll pause here really quick. If anybody has any questions, again, feel free to ask on the chat if I'm going too fast, for example, and you'd like me to repeat something. Okay, so let me go back to reflective and free writing as another technique. So this exercise, like I mentioned before, can greatly overcome writer's block. If any of you had trouble starting an essay, this can help a lot. This is a way to kind of get your ideas flowing. So simply write anything and everything that comes to mind. You don't have to worry about grammar, not to worry about spelling or punctuation. The goal of it is to really just get your ideas on there, get your ideas on the paper. Hopefully, doing this will lead to some type of ideas or themes, which you will then in the future be able to organize and develop further within your formal essay. So again, just throw anything that comes to mind, any like kind of like fluid consciousness, just typing it out or writing it down. All right, so to represent this or to get this idea a little bit more across, we wanted to share a quote here by Alison Law from UC Berkeley. So it reads, "You should follow the flow of your ideas, and you shouldn't pressure yourself to fully tease out everything. You should not censor your ideas. You may be quick to discount an idea, but if you give it a chance, it may take you somewhere totally unexpected and extremely productive in terms of writing a successful paper." And below that, there's an image that depicts a brain, and there under it, it reads "getting stuff from here." And then it's connected to a paper. It says "to" here. So getting stuff from your brain to the paper, and it says an eternal struggle. So hopefully it's not as much of a struggle if you're able to do this reflective free writing exercise. Okay, my light just turned off, sorry. Can you all still see me clearly? Okay, thank you. Okay, so next up we have let me see, I clicked on the outline or reverse outline. This is the last strategy I want to include here. This is probably the one that you may be most familiar with. You know, the outline. Doing an outline may take a lot of time as an initial step, but it will save you a lot of time in the long run. So for example, it will probably save you a lot of time when you're editing, especially helping prevent you from including things in there, content in your essay that doesn't really belong there or it doesn't really relate to your thesis. So that's something that you're trying to prevent from the beginning, then this is the way to go. So one of our coordinator at RAMP has presented this topic in the past, and he previously likened this doing the outline. I forgot to mention our coordinator Dustin at RAMP has previously likened this outline to driving across the country without a map. So, and I think this is a great example because you're probably going to get lost if you don't have a map and you're just driving endlessly around the country, unless you're asking for directions. But I don't want to divert too much. But similarly, if you write an essay without an outline, then your ideas will often seem disorganized. They may not relate back to your thesis, and your reader is probably going to get a little lost or lost completely as they're reading your essay. So there is this traditional outline, which would include, like it's stated here. So your major, what is your major? What would you like to do with your major? And then you could start listing personal characteristics such as your value, strengths, and challenges. Any challenges you overcome, your involvement in academic or non-academic activities, and your leadership roles, as I've mentioned before. And when you're talking about your leadership, we encourage you to not just list your title or your titles, like I was a secretary for this club or historian for this particular org. You also want to explain what the leadership skills you gained from being in that position, or being in that club organization. You need to give concrete examples. All right, so I'll touch a bit on the reverse outline. So with the reverse outline, as it states, it's in the reverse order. So you start with your conclusion and then you work backwards. You work towards identifying the main points that support it. Once you have your main points, then you can start teasing them out with any supporting evidence and any examples. So just a quick outline of that. Let me see how I'm doing with time. Okay, I'm doing good. So some of the steps to how to create a reverse outline. I don't think I included I didn't include a slide on that. But it's basically essentially, like I said, you start from the conclusion and you work your way up. So step number one would be to identify your conclusion. Secondly, brainstorm the main points that support your conclusion. Third, you organize your main points into a logical order. And then you flesh out your main points. You start teasing them out, expanding on them with supporting evidence, with examples. And then you can start revising and editing your outline as needed. As I mentioned in the beginning when I was explaining the outline, again, it's a lot of work in the beginning, but it'll save you quite a bit of work when you're doing the final edit, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So overall, these techniques that I talked about, they can help you organize your thoughts. They can help you ensure that your argument is well supported, and they could help prevent or avoid your writer's block. Okay, now we're going to talk about some tips to organizing yourself to simplify the writing process when you're working on an essay. So another tip when writing is to stay organized. So this is something I kind of smiled and giggled a little bit because this is something that I've struggled with. So it does take practice, and I've used many of these tools. So you can have different tools to help you keep you on track. So for example, keeping your prompt readily available as a reference point. There's different ways of doing this. So when I was writing essays while I was in college, including scholarship essays, I would put the prompt on top of the page, sometimes separately, sometimes on a post-it, and I would bold it. So just having it there while I'm writing it, doing this, you can always refer back to it, back to the prompt or back to the questions, as we saw earlier with an example. Doing this can help ensure that you're addressing the prompt, that you're answering all the questions. Last year, I was one of the scholarship readers, or the essay readers, and we have an outline of what we're looking for. So when we're reading essays, we're also referring back to the questions that you're being asked. So I'm referring back to that, and I'm responding whether you addressed each of the questions. So you want to have this somewhere, whether you want to write it down on a post-it, whether you want to have it in bold on a separate document, just something that you can keep referring back to. You can also create a checklist on a separate page so that you could check off that you're answering all the questions. So I've recently, over the last 2 years, become really big with checklists or to-do lists. So this can also feel satisfying to be able to cross something out or check something off. So this can help you ensure that you're answering all the questions, and that you're offering specific examples that the prompt may be requesting. It may also help you to underline or bold your thesis. If you're working, from the top to the bottom, if you're working from a thesis first, especially, you can make sure that you underline it so that you could stay on track with what you said in your thesis. And then from there, we're going to expand on it throughout the paper, making sure that your thesis is clear. You want to make sure that your thesis is clear. and that you're presenting examples for it, evidence for it, that you're elaborating on it, and that you're providing details. As you're writing or typing your essay, it can also help to underline any transitions you're making and topic sentences to ensure that there's a flow within the paragraphs, like from one paragraph to another. You can refer to your outline and then reorganize it if necessary. And like I mentioned earlier, the outline is like it's like a roadmap. So it's there to guide you. But if you want, you can slightly venture off topic a bit, especially when you're doing the free writing or if you're trying to do a combination of outline free writing. It's your paper, it's your writing, your story. You're always welcome to go back to edit it. And we'll be talking about that in a few minutes about the editing process. So again, feel free to use any of these techniques, staying organized, and when during the editing process, we'll be able to make any corrections necessary. Before we go to the editing slides, we wanted to include some do's and don'ts. So here are some tips of what to include and not to include when you're writing your essay. You do want to use a theme, or so you can, and if you want, you can use a theme or quotation to guide your essay. Something that you want to make sure, you also want to make sure that it's not cliche. So not a quotation that's overly used. Scholarship readers read a lot of essays, so you want them to be interested and engaged with your hook, with your thesis, with your story. From the onset, you could do that with that hook. You do want to share personal goals and values. This is a way for you to introduce yourself, for them to get to know you. Like I mentioned at the beginning, you making that personal and can get help painting your story. You also want to share any personal achievements and failures and how they shaped you, how they have shaped you, how they're continuing to shape you. Taking failures into consideration also. We want to talk about your failures or any challenges. This shows vulnerability and growth. We encourage you to talk about what you learned from these failures, or what you've had to overcome, and also expand on it by including what you would do differently. Doing this can help you through your essay, show that you have the skills to manage failures, to overcome them, to learn from them, that you're using them as a growth opportunity. You also want to share past and current involvement in activities and how you're benefiting them or how you have benefited from them. You can use specific examples. You want to use specific examples because they really help portray, the story of and help you engage the reader while they're getting to know you. You can also use a chronological order. We encourage that to kind of help with the flow of your essay, to guide them with your story. For example, what has happened or something significant that has happened in your life and what has led you to where you're at now. This is also a good opportunity. I don't think I included in this list. If for example, if you received a bad grade and it's not really a pattern that you have, this is a great opportunity to include why you received that grade. If there was a challenge you had to overcome that affected your academics in that point in time, you could elaborate on it. So we do encourage that also. And a few others. We also We also encourage you to solicit feedback, to get feedback from others while you're revising your writing. So getting feedback from someone to point out any areas that you might have gotten lost in, or maybe there's a paragraph that didn't really connect smoothly to another. And this feedback can help you revise your essay. I'll talk a little bit more that in a few minutes. You also want to write an active voice, and many of you, probably most of you have heard this also, writing an active voice. So For example, I wrote this essay versus passive voice, like this essay was written by me. If you have apps or extensions like Grammarly, which is a tool, online tool for grammar, punctuation, sometimes they can help with pointing out instances that like not repeating information, or maybe words that are being repeated, or maybe some grammar rules. But do use them also cautiously. You also want to go back and make sure that it makes sense. There's times that I use Grammarly, I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. So I question it sometimes. So yeah, you want to use it carefully. We don't encourage praising yourself, overly praising yourself, especially if you can't offer evidence, examples with how you're praising yourself. So be cautious of that. We also don't encourage writing about controversial topics. So especially if you don't know the stance of your readers. So for example, if the reader might be really pro one thing or regarding one topic and against another, and behind the scenes we don't know. So you don't want them to bring any outside biases, even though as readers we're told to come in a how do I put it, we don't want to come in with any biases, but sometimes readers can't escape it. Sometimes we will still have them as readers. So it would just be best to not write on a controversial topic. Impartial is the word that I was thinking of. We're asked to be impartial, but sometimes some readers may not avoid it. Also, we encourage not to blame others for your shortcomings. Like I mentioned earlier, if there have been any shortcomings, any obstacles you've had to overcome, kind of elaborating on and how you have overcome them. Try to avoid cliches, jargon, any colloquialism, unfamiliar technology or terminology. So when you're writing, you want to make sure that it will be something understandable, that the reader will understand it. There might be some language from your background, my background, that is probably pretty focused with our, whether it may be culture, background, upbringing, that not all readers may understand. So you want to keep that in mind when you're writing your essays. So one of our former advisors, her name is Denise, provided an example in the past how she was an English teacher. She still is. The struggle is real, she offered as an example. Like the struggle is real that she's seen them write in their papers. And some readers may not understand exactly what the struggle is real means. So you may intend it to come across a certain way, but will the reader take it as such or understand it as you're intending it to? To me. Also, earlier I mentioned that you could use a draft of an essay you have and tailor it. And with that being said, we don't encourage you to recycle your essay entirely, especially if you're reapplying to a scholarship that is being offered once a year. You want to still make your essay relevant to you and your experiences, but you also want to update it with what you've learned since you last used that essay or that draft. So let's say if it's an annual scholarship, what have you learned? What have you done in that year that you haven't that you hadn't done before? So just in case if it's the same scholarship reader, the same person reading, and you don't want them to think, well, they applied to this last year and they basically just used the same essay. They didn't really put much effort into resubmitting it. That may be some of the things that they think of when they see the same essay being resubmitted a year later. Another thing, we don't encourage you to use absolute language like I always or I never or everyone is this way or everyone doesn't do this or that. Okay, so we don't encourage that, and once again, try your best to not write in passive voice. And now we're going over what I mentioned earlier, revising and editing. So this is part of the essay writing process, right? The editing aspect, it's also very important. During the editing portion, you want to ensure that your essay is organized, that it flows, that the reader can follow and understand what you're communicating. But during this process of editing is where any outside resources, campus programs, support programs, like the Writing Center could come in really handy. So if you're not familiar with the Writing Center, they offer tutoring in person and online. They also have a Canvas option where they help you with any written content. So they have drop-in advising where you could go in person and they'll provide suggestions, feedback regarding your writing. And they also, like I mentioned, they have a Canvas option where you could submit it via Canvas, and someone will respond typically within 72 hours. I think they have within 72 hours to respond. We also encourage you to connect with your advisors or peer mentors or peer tutors from different programs that you may belong, that you may be part of. So for example, I mentioned at the beginning, some of you may be coming from EOP, from the Education Opportunity Program, from the Reading Advising Mentoring Program, from Bronco Scholars, from Arches, to review and provide feedback on your essay. So tapping to these resources, it can help you develop your story and they could help you through the editing process. Some additional tips when you're revising, you want to look at the content of your essay as a whole. You could start off that way. So that's one tip. So you're making sure that you have, like we talked about earlier, thesis statement, that you have examples, that you're looking at the overall structure of the essay, that your structure is appropriate with the paragraphs supporting, the thesis, and that they flow well. And then you could also begin or start checking for any strengths and weaknesses that you included, or maybe you have missed that you want to include. You could also start looking at the word count, that you meet the word count. So that's another tip, is to pay attention with the prompt or the rules of the scholarship that once provided is the word count. That's an easy way to lose some points if it's a point system, to lose some points on your essay submission. You can then start focusing in your essay more sentence to paragraph to paragraph, sentence to sentence, reviewing your spelling, your grammar, your punctuation, the tone, the tone that you're presenting throughout. When you're revising, you may start noticing paragraphs or sentences that don't really fit. They may not really go well with the rest of overall paper. So you could revise accordingly. You may also use you could also start using online tools during this stage. So I've kind of dabbled with a few programs. Like now Microsoft Word has the editing tool. We have Grammarly, even Google Docs now has an editing tool. So you could kind of dabble with those, but again, using them cautiously and still reviewing the recommendation from those programs. Which brings us to our to one of our final steps, is to finalize and proofread your paper. So highlighting any errors, any punctuation marks that you need to include. So these are the things that I was mentioning earlier. Another tip is that you could use programs to read your paper out loud. So like Google Translate is one. Maybe you have other examples if you'd like to share in the chat. To read it out loud, and that way you could, if you can hear the tone, not the tone, but more of well, yeah, you could call it a tone also. the tone that your message conveys, and the overall structure of it, whether it flows well or not. Okay. So some additional tips include, finding the right scholarship for you by visiting the CPP Office of Financial Aid Scholarships web portal. If you simply type in CPP scholarships, well, at least for me, it has worked. It typically takes you to the scholarship portal, directly to the scholarship portal. And Cal Poly Pomona, we officially call it Scholarship Fest. That time ranging from October to March. And there's a search bar where you could, even include some keywords that you're seeking that could include your major. Once again, you want to use some time management. There are some deadlines that might be earlier than others, so you want to pay attention to the deadlines, and that you have ample time to be able to pre-write, do your outline, your free write, and receive ample time to receive feedback. And like I mentioned a little earlier, to use your campus resources, like the Writing Center, any of the programs that you're part of. Lastly, if you receive the scholarship, it's also not a bad idea whatsoever to thank. I mean, we highly encourage you to thank those who helped you along the way. So those who helped you along the way with the editing, with the feedback, and then also those behind the scholarship, so the donors. And if you had to include a list of references, anyone who recommended you to a scholarship, anyone who reviewed your scholarship. Okay, so how are we with time?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. So I'm actually gonna speed through these. We got through the slides that were, I think, most important. The next few slides were more of examples, to give some concrete examples of how to expand on certain sentences. So for example, we expanded on here the first draft, I am a very hardworking individual, to instead putting, at my current job, there is a lot of downtime. Instead of just sitting around, I stay busy by dusting, cleaning, and preparing for the next day. I take initiative and look for things that need to be done, instead of waiting to be told what to do. But even as I'm reading this, there's a few things that I would change to change the tone, to change the word usage. But this is just to give you an example how you can expand on a sentence and to give more concrete examples. So we have examples of piquing the reader's interest. I mentioned earlier, like using a hook or using a story or quote. So I'm not going to read over it now, to avoid cliches. And we also have a scholarship essay worksheet. Let me see if I could go to it. Are you able to see the worksheet here? I'm just going to give
Yes.
just a quick thank you. A quick overview here, and we just send this out via email to those who are attending. So this is a worksheet to help you with your outline, to help you organize your essay. So once again, you could use this, you could be strict with it, use it outline in chronological order. You could do the reverse outline, start from your conclusion, which we see a bit more here at the end. And we could also use it in tandem with the free writing. Okay, so this is just an example, and we'll share with you in an email. Okay, so I'm gonna skip over the sample essays. We're just giving some example of how to correct, edit some essays here in order to allow time for questions. Okay, so thank you for being here throughout the presentation. I want to open it up to questions now. So you're welcome to unmute yourself or share them in the chat.
Hey, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so I've noticed that a lot of the scholarships have like, okay, you have to be full-time at the time of submitting the scholarship and at the time of your receiving the scholarship. And like, let's say like you're not meeting like the basic requirements or like you don't have a 3.0 GPA, would it still be worth your time to apply?
Hmm, I would say I'm leaning towards yes. I think you may lose some points depending on who's I think reviewing the scholarship essay. Um, but I also want to get some feedback from my colleagues here because we may have different opinions here. I personally have in the past still applied to scholarships where I didn't meet all the requirements, but some may be more strict than others. I would say that the at least those who are giving the scholarship away, especially if there's a lot of um, especially if there's a lot of applicants. Um, and I have heard of examples where there's not a lot of applicants, so they may be a little bit more loose with the requirements. But that is where, that's kind of like where I'm leaning towards. I would towards yes, still apply.
I see. Okay.
And I would just go ahead and add to that. If you know the organization and you have a contact person, you can kind of ask, like, do you tend to get a lot of applicants? Because I agree with Christian. If it's like you have to be first gen and you're not first gen, like it's identity based, then you probably don't want to. So it is circumstantial. But if you're just like below the GPA, I agree with Christian because there are several examples or circumstances where they'll kind of make exceptions because they haven't received enough applicants. And also it depends how much time it's going to take from you, right? If it's like a really major like undertaking, then you need to measure whether or not it's going to be worth your time. Research that organization to find out like what's the likelihood. Like I've been told like of scholarships where they're like, yeah, nobody applied, and it's like, all right, well, let's just get as many people as possible that we know to apply.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
No problem.
Yes,
Belen has her hand up.
Hi, my question is if you're first year, so in college, right? It's your first year. And let's say like you have experience as far as like volunteering maybe in one or two places. But for example, like I've gone through the catalog of scholarships and I found that a lot of them they like require a lot of experience in a couple things. And so I guess it's kind of on the same basis as the other question. But if you well, yeah, if you just don't have like that much experience, like what would you advise to do as far as your essay to, I want to say, like reach that level anyways?
If it's experience related, I encourage you to still apply. And especially you mentioned like, if you're involved in two organizations, two clubs, or extracurricular activities, maybe you could elaborate on those activities. You could elaborate on how you spend your time, and that way it justifies how you're using your time. So you can still, strongly support your essay to justify why you should receive the scholarship. There are some examples of essays that I've read where they just don't include anything whatsoever, or maybe they answer the question, I'm not involved in anything, and in their essay they don't expand on the why they're not involved. So that would also help for those, for example, that are working full-time, are going to school full-time, and realistically don't have enough time to get involved in extracurricular activities. Just elaborate on it in the essay, the why. Okay, I see a thumbs up. And then I also saw, okay, so before I go to the next question, I want to respect everybody's time. So once again, thank you. If you're open to sticking around to asking more questions, we'll be here. We'll stick around. If you also want to email us, you could email me at simuri@cbb.edu, or you could email us at ramp@cbb.edu if you have questions you have to go. We also have a survey link, so please fill out our survey. Laura included it in the chat, so you could click on that as a quick few questions. And okay, now we'll move on to the next question. I saw David, if I'm not mistaken, he raising his hand.
Yeah, so similar question to the other two.
Yes.
There are engineering scholarships open to only like engineering majors, but I'm undeclared and I haven't seen any undeclared scholarships. And I was just wondering if I can still like apply to the engineering scholarship without being an engineering major.
And
Yeah.
you're not intending, or you're not exploring the possibility of being engineer major? Just
I am, but
You are.
I'm not like labeled an engineering major yet. So I'm not
see.
sure if I
I'm leaning towards yes, applying and including that in there. What I had asked you, the explaining that you're intending, you're strongly exploring that major. It's that's my response. Yeah, and I'm seeing some people agreeing with that. So just in your essay, elaborating on exactly what you explained to us here. Yeah, you're undeclared as of now, but you're strongly considering engineering, and perhaps elaborate on the field also, like how is that part of your goals and what you're going to do with it.
Chris,
And I
I'm just
see
going to add to
Patricia.
that.
Yes, please.
For some of them, I mean, yes, always apply, but if it is something that you're required to be in that major, they'll filter you out. So,
see.
you know, if it's not something like that, but yeah, if you are intending to do that, then you do want to explain that. But if that is a prerequisite, they'll filter you out yourself. So, you know, let them reject you. Don't reject yourself.
That's a great tip for sure. Thank you, Patricia.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, and that's a great tip overall. This is like yeah, when you were applying to opportunities, yeah, don't reject yourself, don't leave yourself out of the running, if you want to say it that way. Yeah, let them reject you. At least you tried.
If I can add to that, similar to what has been said, acknowledge that you don't fully meet the requirements, because then it looks like you don't know how to read either. The instructions say XYZ and you're applying anyway. So the reader might be like, oh my goodness, they're not even paying attention. So if you say, you know, yes, this is a scholarship for engineering majors, I've taken XYZ classes in preparation to declare into engineering, that is my goal, and move on from there.
Yes.
But similarly with the GPA, my GPA has taken a hit during COVID, but if you look at the pattern prior and so forth. So acknowledging that you're not fully meeting the requirements, I think can help your case. Somebody might disagree with me, but that's, as a reader of scholarship essays, that's what I would prefer to see.
Yes. Thank you for elaborating on that. Yes. So acknowledging it and expanding on it. Okay, any other questions? I don't see any more hands raised up. You're welcome to unmute yourself if you have any last questions before we head out. Okay, no, if not, again, that concludes our presentation. I appreciate you all for joining us. And if you're not familiar with some of our programs, feel free to also reach out to us. I'm gonna put a quick plug in for RAMP. Our application is open year round. All right, thank you.